You have 72 unpaid parking tickets. That's what the voice on the phone said as I stood in my pasture, holding a bucket of goat feed and wondering if this was some sort of prank. "Excuse me," I replied, blinking at my goat Larry, who just stared back like he was judging me for even answering a number with a 1 to 800 prefix. "You'll need to settle the fees immediately to avoid further penalties." The woman's tone was robotic, as if she was used to reading from a script. I looked down at my boots, then across the dusty acres of my ranch, 20 miles from the nearest neighborhood, let alone an HOA. I didn't even own a car. I hadn't owned one in 5 years. So unless the goats were sneaking into town and parallel parking without me, someone was seriously confused, or trying to scam me out of a serious chunk of change. At first, I laughed. The absurdity of it all felt like something from a comedy sketch. I mean, who gets slapped with dozens of parking tickets when they haven't left the ranch in weeks and their primary mode of transportation is a diesel ATV? But then the official letters started arriving. First one, then 5, then an entire manila envelope stuffed with violation notices, each citing me for unauthorized vehicle parking, expired decals, infringing on fire lanes, and even one for blocking mail delivery in a cul-de-sac I'd never heard of. Every notice had the same return address, Meadowbrook Estates, HOA. I looked it up on a map and nearly choked on my coffee. It was a gated community clear across the county line, filled with pastel-colored homes, jogging moms, and zero livestock. I called the number listed, fully expecting to clear things up with a quick explanation. But after 20 minutes of bouncing between departments, I finally landed on someone named Troy, who insisted I had registered 3 vehicles to their community. I asked him to name them: a red Toyota Camry, a silver Nissan Altima, and a black Escalade. I couldn't help but laugh again. I hadn't owned a Toyota since college. And who the hell was driving an Escalade in my name? "Sir," I said, struggling to stay calm, "I own goats, not cars. I think you've got the wrong guy." But Troy was unmoved. "The system shows them registered to your address," he said flatly. "If you wish to dispute the lien, you'll need to speak with our compliance officer." Wait, lien? The word hit me like a punch to the ribs. This wasn't just some mistaken ticketing system. This was a financial attack on my land. Sure enough, a week later, a certified letter confirmed it. The HOA had placed a lien on my ranch for non-payment of over 80 parking violations. I couldn't believe it. My property wasn't even under their jurisdiction. I wasn't part of any HOA. I wasn't even zoned residential. Yet somehow, this HOA had manipulated paperwork to tie my land into their domain. I needed answers, and fast. I started by driving into Meadowbrook, using my neighbor's truck since mine was loaded with hay. As I pulled up to the gated community, a pudgy security guard in a yellow vest stepped forward and raised an eyebrow. "You here for Karen?" he asked. That name meant nothing to me at the time. "I'm here to speak to someone about some parking tickets I didn't get," I replied. He radioed someone, and a few minutes later, out walked the embodiment of suburban tyranny. Perfectly feathered bob cut, oversized sunglasses, a clipboard in one hand and an air of superiority thicker than Texas humidity. "Karen. I assume you're the one with the ranch," she said, like it was a disease. I told her I didn't live in Meadowbrook, didn't own any vehicles, and had no connection to their HOA. Her response? She snorted. "Due to recent zoning adjustments, your parcel now falls within our extended enforcement area." I was speechless. "Extended enforcement area?" I repeated, stunned. "What is that, the Empire?" She didn't laugh. She didn't blink. She just handed me a freshly printed notice. "Refusal to pay will result in foreclosure proceedings." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw her clipboard into the nearest decorative fountain. But instead, I took a photo of the document and got back in the truck. I needed legal help. On the way home, my mind was spinning. How could a neighborhood association I didn't even belong to reach across town and slap a lien on my land? And how had they registered vehicles under my name? Someone had to be forging documents. Or worse, someone was using my identity for something shady. My first stop was a local attorney named Miguel, an old friend from high school who owed me a favor after I helped him rebuild a shed that collapsed in a storm. When I showed him the notices, his reaction said it all. He burst out laughing. "Dude," he said, flipping through them, "you got a ticket for parking too close to a fire hydrant on Birchwood Drive. Do you even know where Birchwood is?" I shook my head. "No clue." Miguel opened a satellite map. "It's literally a cul-de-sac with like 6 minivans and a frozen yogurt shop. There's no way your ranch is part of this HOA. And even if it were, they can't enforce this stuff across zoning districts." But the lien paperwork was real. Miguel made a few calls and found out that someone named K. Randall had submitted a zoning update with the county just 2 months earlier. He showed me the file, complete with satellite imagery and a digital boundary line that now magically included my land. It was forged. It had to be. My ranch sat way outside any residential expansion zone. But someone had slipped the documents through county records, and now the system thought I was in the HOA's domain. It didn't make sense, until Miguel narrowed his eyes at the name. Karen Randall. That's our clipboard queen. Now things were getting clearer. Karen had filed paperwork to redraw the HOA's limits, looped my land in, then started issuing fake parking tickets to create a paper trail of unpaid violations. And since I never responded, because who checks for fake HOA mail when you live in a barn half the week, she had enough evidence to slap a lien on the property. Miguel leaned back and whistled. "This ain't just petty. This might be criminal." And so began my war. I didn't want to get even. I wanted the truth. And I wanted every single parking ticket shoved so far down Karen's clipboard that it popped out her dashboard camera. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about principle. And revenge, preferably with goats involved. The next morning, before the sun had even dried the dew on the fence posts, I was back at Miguel's office, this time with 2 cups of gas station coffee and a USB drive full of satellite images I had compiled overnight. I didn't sleep much. Instead, I spent the dark hours clicking through Google Earth, old survey maps, and zoning records until my eyes went dry. Every document confirmed the same thing. My ranch was nowhere near Meadowbrook Estate. Not even close. I had boundaries recorded since my grandfather first registered the land in the 70s. Yet somehow, a rogue HOA with a power-hungry Karen had stretched its imaginary claws across half the county to slap fraudulent fines on my property. Miguel reviewed the maps, sipped his coffee, and leaned forward. "We're gonna need a deeper dig," he said. "They didn't just screw up a record. Someone intentionally updated your coordinates in the system. That doesn't happen by accident." And so we called in backup. My cousin Eli, the black sheep of the family and a self-declared digital mercenary, was in town. He lived out of a solar-powered van with 10 different laptops and a tendency to expose small-town corruption for sport. Eli once cracked a sheriff's office email server to prove they were using drone footage to spy on backyard BBQs. I hadn't seen him in years, but I knew if anyone could untangle this HOA mess, it was him. He showed up that evening with a duffel bag full of tech and a jar of homemade kombucha. Within 30 minutes, he had pulled up the HOA's online records, admin panels, payment processing logs, and an entire archive of ticket data that should have been locked behind a firewall. What we found was both hilarious and horrifying. Every single one of the 87 parking violations had been input manually, by Karen. The system showed timestamps, IP addresses, and location pings. It wasn't even subtle. Her entries included bogus details like red Camry seen idling near community mailbox, and Escalade parked on HOA trailhead during yoga hour. All of it was tied to my name and my address. Worse, the HOA software had a new expansion zone function added just 2 months prior, which allowed tickets to be issued to properties outside the neighborhood, in cases of community risk. That feature, too, had been added by Karen under an admin tag labeled K_Scandal_admin+. It was a digital power trip, and she had clearly gone off the rails. Miguel shook his head as Eli screen-shared everything to a local backup server. This is fraud. It's not even clever fraud. It's like she tried to commit a federal crime using a library computer and left her name in every tab. Eli chuckled and tapped into the HOA's budget report. That's when we discovered the real motive. Karen had been collecting violation fines and transferring them into a side account labeled Administrative Efficiency Fund. On paper, it looked legitimate. In practice, it was a bank account opened under a DBA registered to a defunct landscaping company. A little more digging revealed the routing number matched an offshore account flagged in another state for a separate HOA embezzlement case. The rabbit hole kept getting deeper, and Karen was bouncing around inside it like a squirrel on espresso. I decided we weren't going to the authorities just yet. I needed one more ace up my sleeve before we went nuclear. I told Eli to start printing. Every screenshot, every transaction, every GPS ping, every document she filed, every ticket timestamp. Miguel contacted a local surveyor who confirmed my property had not, at any point in the last 40 years, been zoned under residential association management. We were assembling a war chest of evidence, but now we needed to drop it in the most public, humiliating way possible. As fate would have it, Meadowbrook's quarterly HOA town hall was only 3 days away. It was being hosted at their sparkling new community center, complete with rental chairs, complimentary hummus trays, and decorative ferns that probably cost more than my month's feed bill. Karen would be there, clipboard in hand, probably wearing a sash that said, "Madam President." Miguel and I decided we would attend, not as petitioners, but as truth bombs wrapped in cowboy hats and sarcasm. We weren't just going to confront her. We were going to dismantle her entire empire in front of her peers. The night before the meeting, I prepped like I was heading into a courtroom brawl. I printed out satellite maps in poster size, framed a copy of the LIEN, and laminated a selection of the most ridiculous parking violations. My personal favorite was one that claimed I had parked a black SUV inside the HOA's seasonal tulip garden during dusk meditation. That same evening, Eli uploaded everything to a public Dropbox folder just in case things went sideways. He even gave it a name, Operation Goatstorm. The day of the meeting, I wore boots that still had dried hay stuck to them and brought along a folding easel. Miguel wore his nicest sports coat and carried a briefcase so full of evidence it looked like it had swallowed a fax machine. When we arrived at the HOA center, Karen spotted us instantly. Her smile froze halfway through a sentence, and her hand clutched her clipboard like it was a holy relic. "This meeting is for residents only," she sniffed. Miguel calmly showed her the LIEN notice. "He's a resident now, remember? You claimed his ranch falls under your jurisdiction. So technically, he has every right to speak." She narrowed her eyes but said nothing. The meeting began with Karen droning through committee updates and budget reports. Then came the floor time. Miguel stood, introduced us, and stated our reason for attending. We were here to address an alleged LIEN filed in error and to present some documentation. Karen's face tightened. "You may speak for 3 minutes." Miguel nodded, then stepped aside. I walked up to the mic, set the easel down, and pulled back the cover sheet to reveal a blown-up screenshot of one of Karen's ticket entries. The audience, mostly polite retirees and dog walkers, leaned in. I pointed at the screen. "This is a ticket for a red Camry parked near Lot C. Issued at 5:52 a.m. 2 weeks ago. That same morning, I was bottle feeding a sick goat named Patches. Here's the time-stamped video. And here's the satellite image proving my ranch is 20 miles outside this HOA's map." I flipped to the next slide, a transfer record showing Karen's admin activity. Gasps followed, then laughter. Karen tried to interrupt, but Miguel calmly presented the surveyor's statement, the bank account tracing, and the zoning record history. One resident stood and said, "Wait, you've been ticketing people who don't live here?" Another pulled out her phone and whispered, "I think I got one of those too." The room was turning. Karen's cheeks burned bright red. She stood up, pointed at me, and yelled, "This is a coordinated smear campaign. He's not even a real resident." Miguel calmly responded, "Then why did you place a lien on his property? You can't have it both ways." The board members looked uncomfortable. Some scribbled notes. One of them picked up his phone and walked out. Karen stood frozen, torn between rage and realization. She had been caught. Not just in a mistake, but in a full-blown scheme that had now blown open in a public forum. I leaned into the mic one last time. "You gave me 87 parking tickets, Karen. I don't own a car. But I do own every receipt, every screenshot, and every second of video showing you lied. You may have tried to drag me into your HOA, but now I'm dragging your entire board into court." The room exploded. And Karen? She bolted out the back door, knocking over a hummus tray on the way out. Word of what happened at the town hall meeting spread faster than wildfire in a dry August. Within hours, someone had posted a clip of Karen storming out, hummus dripping from her designer flats, and it had already gone semi-viral on local Facebook groups with captions like, "Karen gets goat," and "HOA president gets ticketed by truth." My cousin Eli, who had apparently uploaded the entire incident from 5 different camera angles, was now monitoring dozens of online threads where people from other neighborhoods were chiming in with their own HOA horror stories. Some even claimed they'd received similar tickets from Meadowbrook despite never stepping foot in the place. The digital blowback was gaining momentum, but Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The very next morning, I awoke to the sound of engines on gravel. I looked out the window and nearly spit out my coffee. A flatbed tow truck was parked just outside the front gate of my ranch. 2 guys in reflective vests were standing next to my old wheelbarrow, debating whether it qualified as a vehicle under mobile property clauses. I stepped outside in disbelief, still in my boots and flannel pajamas. "Are y'all seriously about to tow a wheelbarrow?" I asked. One of them scratched his head. "We got orders to impound non-compliant transport registered under HOA case file 94Z. "That's a wheelbarrow," I deadpanned. "It doesn't even have an engine. It's literally older than both of you." The younger one shrugged. "Doesn't matter, sir. This came from the HOA." I asked who sent the order. They showed me a printed memo signed, unsurprisingly, by Karen Randall. At the bottom was a line that read, "Property continues to defy vehicular regulations. Execute removal immediately." Just when I thought I'd seen it all, here was Karen doubling down by trying to tow my tools. Thankfully, one of the drivers recognized me from the town hall video. He laughed, tossed the tow strap back in the truck and said, "Man, I'm out. I didn't sign up for this HOA nonsense." He walked away, leaving the other guy scrambling to figure out what to do next. He eventually left too, mumbling about how his boss was going to kill him. But not before I handed him a laminated photo of my goat Larry with a fake license plate around his neck. "Just in case she tries to ticket livestock next," I said. He actually chuckled. By now I was furious but not surprised. Karen had made it personal. She wasn't trying to fix a clerical error or even cover up what she'd done. She was retaliating. Miguel warned me this would happen. When people like her get exposed, they either crumble or claw back harder. She's clawing. But that gives us leverage. That's when we hit her with the counterstrike. Miguel filed a claim of property harassment and abuse of process in civil court, along with a counter lien against the Meadowbrook HOA's central asset, their community pool. The pool, it turned out, sat on a parcel of land that had an old deed tied to a developer who never officially transferred it to the HOA. That detail came from Eli, who spent 2 sleepless nights digging through dusty microfilm and real estate registries like he was solving a national treasure riddle. It meant the land the pool sat on could technically be claimed under a legal mechanism called adverse possession, especially since the HOA had failed to register the title update for over a decade. We filed, posted notice, and within days, our attorneys issued an injunction. HOA members arrived at their weekend pool party only to find a legal notice taped to the front gate that read, "Property in dispute, entry at own risk." Karen lost her mind. She left me 5 voicemails, each more unhinged than the last. The final one ended with her screaming something about, "You can't take our pool, you country menace," and then what sounded like a blender turning on in the background. To turn up the heat, I decided it was time for a little country creativity. I hosted what I called the Goat Parking Festival, right on the access road that led to Meadowbrook's side entrance. We set up signs that said, "Free parking, no HOA tickets guaranteed," brought in hay bales, barbecue, and local bluegrass bands, and invited the entire county. But the stars of the event were the goats. Each goat wore a cardboard cutout license plate labeled with things like, "Not a Toyota," and "Ticket me, Karen." People laughed, took selfies, and danced around a fake meter labeled Karen's citation counter that spun every time someone fed it $1. The funds, of course, went to the Legal Defense Fund. Police were called, of course. But when they arrived and saw we were on private land, fully permitted, and not blocking any actual roads, they just chuckled. One officer even took a selfie with a goat named Biscuit. Karen showed up halfway through, stood at the edge of the field, fuming like she had just bitten into a lemon she thought was a cupcake. I gave her a friendly wave. She stormed off again, muttering into her phone, probably to another HOA lawyer who was already contemplating retirement. The publicity from the event was explosive. A local news crew did a feature called Rancher vs. HOA, The Great Goat Standoff. Reddit threads exploded with memes. My personal favorite was one with Karen's face photoshopped onto a mall cop, holding up a parking boot in front of a goat-drawn carriage. But it wasn't just for laughs. People started coming forward with their own HOA nightmares. Some had received tickets from Meadowbrook despite never having lived there. One guy even claimed he got a warning letter for a red Nissan Altima parked in front of a grocery store, and he lived in another state. Miguel saw an opportunity. He started gathering names and building a potential class action lawsuit. We compiled dozens of documents showing patterns of abuse, fraudulent ticketing, and an expanding radius of HOA enforcement that ignored municipal boundaries entirely. The final blow came when Eli tracked down a server hosting Karen's admin logs. In it, he found a hidden user group called Revenue Boosters, where Karen and a few HOA officers had discussed ways to increase fine collections, including targeting unregulated parcels, registering ghost vehicles, and leveraging legal ambiguity until challenged. It was a goldmine of incrimination. We printed everything. Every message. Every timestamp. Every shady suggestion they had whispered behind closed firewalls. The case was no longer just a personal feud. It was turning into a major legal and public relations disaster for Karen and her whole board. The pool was closed, the board was fractured, and Karen was now under the microscope of a half-dozen investigative reporters sniffing around her finances, her emails, and her bizarre obsession with suburban power. But even with all the wins piling up, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done yet. People like her don't back down quietly. They look for the next loophole, the next backdoor, the next dirty trick to pull. And sure enough, just as we were preparing our final case summary, Miguel walked into my barn holding a letter, eyes wide. It was another lien. But this time, it wasn't from Meadowbrook. It was from a completely different HOA, miles away, one I had never even heard of. Yet somehow, the same vehicle IDs were listed, the same violation codes, and the same forged signatures. That's when I realized. Karen wasn't just a bad HOA president. She was running a network. And this war was far from over. Miguel stared at the letter like it had just insulted his entire law degree. I grabbed it from his hand and read through it again, slower this time, hoping I had missed something. But there it was, plain as day, another lien. A whole new HOA claiming I owed them over $8,000 in parking fines for vehicles I didn't own, in a community I had never stepped foot in. The name of the HOA was different, the layout of the citation was new, but the details were too familiar. Same fake vehicle descriptions. Same random timestamps. Same tone of bureaucratic smugness. And at the bottom, the kicker. A signature in loopy cursive, signed K. Randall, Director of Collections. It didn't even try to hide it anymore. We couldn't believe it. Karen had somehow spread her scam across HOA. Not just one. Multiple. It wasn't just about my ranch anymore. It was an entire playbook of fraud disguised under layers of administrative paperwork. She had found a way to hijack small, disorganized homeowner associations across the county and use them to print money in the form of fines, liens, and intimidation. And apparently, nobody had bothered to verify anything because the system was designed to protect the HOA first and question homeowners later. Eli dove into this new HOA's infrastructure like a bloodhound chasing a scent. Within hours, he was already into their member portal, posing as a resident using a generic login that hadn't been changed in 3 years. What he found was shocking. Not only was the same exact software being used across multiple HOAs, but the backend logs showed shared admin users, all tied back to the same email handle, randalco.operations@execmail.net. That same address had posted internal policy suggestions across 4 different HOA boards, each with a different shell corporation name registered under Karen's old landscaping company. She had effectively franchised HOA scams. Not only was she abusing power, she had systematized it. Miguel made some calls. Within a day, 2 more victims surfaced. One man from a neighboring town received 12 separate parking citations in a community he only drove through once a month to visit his in-laws. Another woman had a lien placed on her rental property after the HOA claimed her unregistered guests had overstayed parking limits on a private gravel driveway in a cabin area with no marked street. It was the same method over and over. A new HOA popped up, claimed a random parcel of land under jurisdiction due to a mysterious boundary expansion, and then began issuing tickets through falsified surveillance logs. And every single trail led back to Karen. Eli found something even more disturbing. Buried inside encrypted admin notes was a file labeled Projected Quarterly Revenue, Expansion Zone Targets. When decrypted, it revealed a spreadsheet of over 50 properties flagged for future ticketing, each one far outside any HOA boundary. My ranch was listed at the top, color-coded red, labeled High Resistance. Several other names were on the list too, some of whom we knew, and others who had no idea their land was about to become a battleground. We couldn't sit on this any longer. This had gone from petty fraud to a full-blown racket. Miguel compiled the evidence, bundled every file, every login, every trace of money flow, and forwarded it all to a federal property crimes task force he had worked with once on a land zoning corruption case. Within hours, they replied. Not only were they interested, they were coming in person. That weekend, a pair of clean-cut agents showed up at the ranch. No suits, just jeans and windbreakers, the kind of folks who looked like they could either help dig a fence post or wiretap a phone line without breaking a sweat. We walked them through everything. The forged documents, the cross-HOA scam network, the liens, the offshore account, the shared software, everything. They nodded silently, taking notes, asking sharp questions. One of them, Agent Daly, asked if we still had the original notice Karen had slapped on my gate. I handed it over. He chuckled as he read it. "This is the sloppiest organized fraud I've seen in 10 years, he said. But it's still federal property interference, and wire fraud, and tax evasion if the money's crossing borders." The agents didn't wait. They returned the next day with a search warrant and raided Meadowbrook's HOA office. Residents watched from their driveways as boxes of documents were carried out, computers were unplugged, and Karen herself was led away in handcuffs, red-faced and shrieking something about diplomatic immunity. It was all caught on camera, of course. Someone from the neighborhood filmed it and uploaded it with the title, "Karen Cuffed Over HOA Hustle." It went viral before the agents even finished their paperwork. But the drama didn't end with Karen's arrest. The rest of the HOA board was thrown into chaos. 3 of them resigned immediately, claiming they had no idea what Karen was doing. One tried to deny everything but got caught after Eli found an email thread where he'd suggested they start ticketing RVs parked at churches for holiday overages. Another board president from a nearby HOA quietly disappeared after the feds visited his office. Turns out Karen wasn't acting alone. She had built a little kingdom of clipboard tyrants who thought no one would notice as long as the forms looked official and the victims were too confused to fight back. The lien on my ranch was dropped overnight. All 87 parking tickets were declared void. The second HOA that tried to tag me also withdrew their claim, citing data entry errors. But the damage was done. Karen's empire had been built on forged lines and fake fees, and now it was crumbling faster than a wet cardboard castle. The federal team issued a statement calling it one of the most bizarre property fraud networks in recent state history. News outlets picked it up. They called it the HOA sting of the century. I called it Tuesday. After the dust settled, Eli threw a bonfire party at the ranch. We burned every parking citation we had printed and used Karen's original clipboard as the kindling. Friends, neighbors, and fellow victims showed up. Some brought homemade signs like "Unticketable" and "No HOA can tame me." Others brought goat treats and lawn chairs. We laughed, we drank, we told stories, and we made one thing clear: no one messes with rural folks and gets away with it. Especially not someone with a plastic badge and a power complex. But even as the fire crackled and the last ticket curled into ash, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done yet. The system that let Karen thrive was still out there. The software. The unchallenged authority of HOAs. The silence that let them operate without oversight. We'd taken down the queen, but the board was still in play. And I had a feeling that if no one stood up to them, someone just like Karen would crawl out of the shadows with another clipboard, another smile, and another scam. So I made a decision. I wasn't just going to protect my ranch anymore. I was going to protect every ranch, every cabin, every lot some HOA tried to claim with a fake map and a forged document. And that meant going bigger, going public, and maybe, just maybe, taking the fight to the place Karen never expected, a courtroom where the rules were real and clipboards held no power at all. The morning after the bonfire, I stood at the edge of my ranch with a cup of coffee, watching Larry the goat gnaw on a leftover cardboard citation like it owed him money. Smoke still drifted from the pile of burned paperwork, and ashes swirled in the wind across the pasture. The air was calm, but the storm we kicked up was just beginning. Miguel was already on his way over, his phone buzzing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and folks from all across the country who had seen the footage, read the headlines, and realized they might have been victims too. It was bigger than just Meadowbrook, bigger than just Karen. We'd stumbled into something national, and now people were paying attention. That afternoon, Miguel and I met with a group of attorneys who specialized in class action lawsuit. They brought spreadsheets, testimonials, property reports, and case files from multiple states. We weren't alone. Karen's scam had spread far beyond our county. Over a dozen other HOA networks had purchased the same enforcement software she'd manipulated, and many were using it to squeeze homeowners and rural landowners in the same fraudulent way. What started as my personal headache was now a wildfire threatening to burn down everything fake HOAs had built on lies and unchecked power. The lawsuit took shape quickly. Miguel and the lead class action attorney filed under the title Randall et al. V. Nexus Community Management Systems, the shell company that Karen used to disguise her revenue streams and operate across multiple HOA charters. The suit named dozens of board members across 3 states, several software engineers who had helped program the boundary expansion feature, and 2 accounting firms that looked the other way while money was routed into Karen's fake administrative fund. We were suing for fraud, harassment, emotional distress, illegal property liens, and violations of interstate property and data laws. It wasn't just about money, it was about shutting the system down. Meanwhile, my inbox flooded with interview requests. Morning shows wanted me. Podcasts. Even a documentary crew pitched a segment titled HOA Horror: The Goat, the Guy, and the Great Scam. I turned most of them down, but one local news anchor named Patty had been following the story since the first town hall video went viral. I agreed to give her the exclusive. She came out to the ranch with her cameraman and asked me one question to start. Did you ever imagine 87 parking tickets would turn into a nationwide lawsuit? I laughed and pointed to Larry, who had just walked past wearing a dog cone with unregistered vehicle taped on the side. Honestly, I thought someone was pulling a prank. I never thought it'd lead to the FBI taking down a HOA queen pin in broad daylight. The interview aired that night and the reaction was insane. Thousands of comments flooded in. Homeowners across the country shared their own nightmare experiences with overreaching HOA board. Some sent screenshots of ridiculous fines. $100 for having the wrong shade of mulch, $75 for leaving a garden gnome outside during non-holiday months, even $200 for a child's bike parked too close to a flower bed. The country was waking up to the reality that HOAs, unchecked and unregulated, had become mini dictatorships, many of them run by people with more ego than integrity. And now, finally, someone was pushing back. But the biggest twist came a few weeks later. Miguel got a call from a state senator's office. They had seen the lawsuit, followed the investigation, and wanted to propose legislation that would require stricter oversight of HOAs, especially in rural and unincorporated areas. They invited me to speak before a property law subcommittee in the state capitol. I'd never even stepped inside a government building that wasn't for paying property taxes. Now I was being asked to speak on behalf of hundreds of victims. I said yes, packed my boots and best flannel shirt, and drove upstate. The committee room was everything I expected, wood-paneled, way too cold, and filled with people who looked like they hadn't touched dirt in decades. But when I told them my story, their expressions changed. I walked them through every step of what happened, from the first mysterious ticket to the forged lien, from Karen's clipboard crusade to the software that allowed her empire to grow unchecked. I didn't use legal jargon. I didn't try to sound like a lawyer. I just told the truth. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone finally spoke. This should have never been allowed to happen. We'll fix it. And they did. Within a few months, new laws were passed requiring all HOAs to register detailed boundary maps with the state zoning office and provide an opt-out process for properties that had never agreed to be included. Fines above a certain threshold had to be reviewed by a third party. And best of all, software like the kind Karen used was now subject to state audits and compliance check. No more rogue expansion zones. No more fake cars. No more goats getting parking tickets. Back at the ranch, things slowly returned to normal, or at least as normal as things could get when your face had been on national TV and your goat had a fan page. Eli moved on to his next mystery, something involving missing town budgets and a corrupt mayor's pancake fund. Miguel took on more clients who'd been burned by HOAs, becoming a quiet legend in the legal world. And me? I went back to feeding goats, fixing fences, and laughing every time someone asked if I was the no-car rancher from the headlines. But just when I thought the story was over, I got one final letter. Not a citation. Not a lien. Not a summons. It was from the U.S. Property Rights Foundation, thanking me for exposing one of the most elaborate HOA fraud networks in the country. They invited me to be an honorary board advisor, and while I didn't care much for titles, I accepted. Not because I wanted the recognition, but because I never wanted anyone else to go through what I did. I framed that letter. Right next to it, I put up the very first fake parking ticket Karen ever issued me. The one that said I was parked in a red zone in a place I'd never been. It reminded me how absurd it all was, how fragile the systems are when left unchecked, and how far a determined rancher with a goat and a grudge could go. And as for Karen? Last I heard, she'd taken a plea deal in exchange for testimony against the other HOA board members she roped into her mess. Her landscaping company was shut down, her bank accounts were frozen, and she was banned from ever participating in HOA leadership again. That part made me laugh. She could run all the fake maps and forged fines she wanted, but in the end, she got booted from her own clipboard kingdom. Now every time I hear someone complain about a crazy HOA, I smile and ask, how many parking tickets did they give you? When they say 1 or 2, I just shake my head and say, you've got a long way to go before it gets interesting. Because once upon a time, I didn't even own a car. And still, somehow, I managed to take down a parking empire.